Hello. This time around we discussing two parshayot, Behar Bechukotai, two portions. They're the last two portions of the book Bechar, the third book of Tanakh. So in this week parsha, we start with the parsha Bechar, on the mountain. And we learn some very important laws and concepts that apply to the land of Israel, because Parsha starts from Hashem telling Moshe and effectively people of Israel about the laws of Shemitah. What is Shemitah? The same way as we work for 6 days during the week, and then the seventh day is Shabbat, the day of rest, exactly the same way Hashem wanted the children of Israel to work for 6 years in the fields on their land and to conduct all the activities like sowing, pruning, harvesting, planting the plants, weeding, everything what a farmer normally does for a period of 6 years. And then on the seventh year, they must abandon their land. On the seventh year, the year of Shemitah, the land must be allowed to rest. And there can be no planting or harvesting. And instead, anything that grows becomes free for anybody who wants to pick and to enjoy. It means that the owners must allow people, rich and poor, whoever it is, Israelites and non-Israelites, domestic animals, wild beasts, doesn't matter. Anybody is allowed to enjoy the whatever grows takes place on the land, and they can eat as much as they want. They can go to the fields and collect all those fruits and vegetables from the land. As well, obviously, the owner is himself or herself, the owner of this particular piece of land. Naturally, they can go and take as much food as they want as well and enjoy it too. However, they cannot tell the others to leave their land because it's their land, and they cannot collect the food in order to sell it or store it. They only take as much as it's necessary for them to sustain themselves. And the other interesting aspect of it is that in this kind of environment, the ordinary people and the poor people were collecting food together with the rich people. So the rich could learn about the life of the poor people, and which maybe in some respects would soften their hearts and will allow them to give more charity to the poor part of the population who were not so lucky and did not accumulate as much wealth. Every 7th-year cycle Shemitah, and for 7 years, those cycles take place, so there is 7 times 7, 49. However, on the 50th year, it's a special year which is called Yovel or Jubilee year. It is also a year of rest for the land, but in addition to that, all servants go free. It means a number of things. First of all, the slaves are offered to go free, and the owner of the slave must give him some provisions and something to sustain himself, and some clothes and some valuables in order for him not to leave his slavery empty-handed. But he is free to go on the 50th year and return to his family, to his land. As well as all the land returns back to the original owners, which received the land at the time when it was divided by between the tribes of Israel. It means basically that whoever, during the 50 years period, whoever buys a plot of land buys it only on temporary basis. Effectively, the person buys a number of crops, of harvests, from the moment they buy the land to the 50th year. Because on the 50th year, they must return the land back to the original owners, the year of Yovel. That is in itself an incredible aspect of the Jewish law, which has been set up by Hashem in the land of Israel. We will talk about it later in few minutes. Basically, what this is, probably it's a good time to talk about it now. What this is, basically, is a system of distribution of wealth, which is equitable and fair. More than that, it's the beginning of the process of explaining to the whole nation of Israelites that concept of slavery is not so good. And it turns the slavery from the permanent condition, which slavery normally, if somebody is sold as a slave, he's a slave forever, to a temporary condition where on the 50th year he can be freed. Or earlier if the owner wants to, of course. So we will talk about it a little bit more later, but this is a very important aspect of Jewish law. Then there is Behar Bechukotai, where Hashem says, if you keep my Torah, the laws of my Torah, you keep the mitzvot, then I will provide you with rain. It will come whenever you need it, so that the crops will grow. And there will be enough food for everybody, and you will eat until you are satisfied. And you will have peace and security in your land, and no wild beasts or armies will pass through your land. And you will be successful in your battles and victorious over armies outside your land, obviously, larger than yours. And God will be with you. That's what Torah is saying. But then, in this parsha, Torah says, however, if you don't keep my commandments, that's what Hashem is saying, and forget about the agreement, our covenant between you and me, your God, then many unfortunate things will happen and a lot of suffering will take place. What we read in this parsha is basically, in this part of the parsha, is a typical Armageddon scenario when the most horrible things will take place and most horrible things people will experience. But even in that horror of suffering, even then Hashem says, yes, he may be angry at the Jews and maybe he must punish them, but he will never forget them and he will never abandon them. So what is the purpose of all of this? If you are good and everything is good. If you are bad, I will punish you. What it teaches us is the concept of emunah, faithfulness. Hashem, faithfulness to Hashem, and his promise that in the sixth year the harvest will be so bountiful, so huge that you can afford for the 7th year to do nothing and study Torah. That's what he wants. He wants us to have faith in him, in his abilities, that he will. You can imagine those people were farmers, they were agrarian, it was an agrarian culture. So for them to believe and to have faith in the fact that Hashem will provide them with food basically for 2 years. Because if they don't plant on the 7th year, which is they're not allowed, it means they will plant on the 8th year, and it means it will take time for the crop to grow. So it means that Hashem will provide them for 6, and on the 6th year, the harvest will be so big that it will last them for 2 years. And they did have faith in Hashem. More than that, because 7th year is no work, you must simply attend to your studies. And this was the spiritual year when a lot of people, and even today actually on the Shemitah year in Israel, a lot of people spend a year studying Torah and improving their spiritual levels. We also learn in this parsha that it's forbidden to charge a Jew interest on the loans. That means that when we lend someone money, we cannot make a profit from him. As well as we must be honest with each other in all business dealings. You cannot cheat on your clients, and if you cheat on your clients, God forbid you, because it's very hard later on to find whom you actually cheated on and how you're going to rectify the problem. Because Hashem counts everything. And if you ever lied and cheated on your clients in business, that's really very important to rectify that problem. And if you cannot, at least give a donation to somebody. Because otherwise it's, or to some charity, or to some organization. Now, let's return back to the question of equality in distribution of wealth. Only in society where ownership of property is not permanent, which is what I said, on the Jubilee year, all property, land, the buildings, except dwellings in enclosed cities, all of the others, everything goes back to the original owners. Right? So one cannot take everything out of his wealth, of the resources, without any regard for the others. Where people in the society share their wealth, nurture the poor alongside everyone else, relieve debts and hunger, and respect the fundamental human rights to be free, this is where the society can prosper and develop and enjoy life. The sabbatical year was a guarantor and the ultimate fulfillment of the justice the Torah teaches us in practice and in everyday life. And it was a justice that embraced not just fellow human beings, but the land and life itself. And of course, obviously, the aspect of charity and compassion here is absolutely clear, that you can imagine an owner of the land who was, caring about his plot of land and taking care of it for 6 years. Now, he suddenly should allow everybody to use it, to enjoy it. So, something like this is an incredible feat of charitable behavior by our ancestors, as a matter of fact. But let's try to go a little bit deeper in that parsha, and maybe we can discover a little bit more sophisticated concepts. One of the most profound contributions Torah made to the civilization of the West is this: that the destiny of nations lies not in the physical accumulation of wealth or power or good luck or fate, but the destiny of nation lies in responsibility, the responsibility for creating and sustaining a society that honors the image of God within each of its citizens, rich, poor, or powerless. Everything else I'm going to say from this minute onward, I found in the books of Rabbi Jonathan Sachs. He gives an incredible explanation of the purpose of this parsha as part of the foundations of development of our society. Rabbi Sachs is saying that the modern world was shaped by 4 revolutions: the English, the American, French, and Russian. 2, the English and the American revolutions were inspired by our Hebrew Bible, which in the 16th and 17th century, because of Reformation and invention of the printing press, became widely available for the first time in history of humanity. So it means the English and European Puritans were traveling to the United States with the King's Bible, which was the translation of the Jewish Torah, under their arm, reading it all the time, and basically learning the ideas of God. Learning the ideas that slavery is not so good for the society and for them, and definitely for the slaves, and learning the ideas of sharing and caring about each other. Now, so the American and the English revolutions took place on the basis of the teachings of Torah. The French and the Russian revolutions, however, by contrast, were inspired by philosophy of, for the French it was Jean-Jacques Rousseau, and for the Russian Revolution these were the writings of Karl Marx, with assistance from Friedrich Engels. And the histories of those two revolutions are remarkably different. Absolutely different. In England and America, revolution brought war, but led to gradual growth of civil liberties, human rights, representative government, and eventually democracy. The French and Russian revolutions began with dreams of utopia, equality of people, and ended up in a nightmare of hell. Both gave rise to terror, bloodshed, and repression of human rights. Absolutely incredible, horrible dictatorships. What is the difference between philosophy and political vision at the heart of Tanakh, you will say? The Behar Parsha sets out a revolutionary template for the society of justice, freedom, and human dignity. At its core is the idea of Jubilee, whose words proclaim the following: proclaim liberty through all the land unto all the inhabitants thereof. And these words are, not surprisingly, engraved on one of the greatest symbols of freedom, the Liberty Bell in Philadelphia. One of its provisions is the release of slaves. Revolutions based on philosophical systems, however, fail. Why? Because change in human affairs takes time. And philosophy is incapable to understand the human dimension of time. The inevitable result is that Rousseau famous phrase, which he was stating on left, right, and center, force men to be free, is a contradiction in terms. And the reality of life under Soviet communist regime is exactly that as well. The same way as you cannot force people to love you, you cannot force the concept of freedom on them. People must arrive to that. An owner of a slave must slowly but surely arrive to the fact that he is depriving another human being of liberty, of taking care of his or her own life. And the same way the slave must grow with time, that he can be actually free. And this is what Torah is saying here, changing the permanent concept of slavery to a temporary concept. Revolutions based on Tanakh succeed because they go with grain of human nature, recognizing that it takes time for people to change. The Torah did not abolish the slavery straight away, but it set a process in motion that would lead people slowly to come on their own accord to the conclusion that it was wrong to have a slave or to be a slave. Then Hashem says, if you walk in my statutes, and he referred to the commandments, we could understand why only statutes, hukim, were mentioned. Without he didn't refer to the other kinds of commands and testimonies, edut, and judgments, mishpatim. The reason then would be that these commands where they have a rational explanation. The mishpatim and the edut, they have got a very logical explanation, all of them. However, hukim, most of them we cannot even understand. We cannot comprehend them. And in Likutei Torah, the Alter Rebbe explains that the word statue, chok, is related to the word engrave. So, carve out. This phrase in question is the word, what is the word statue? It suggests that we should study and must act on ourselves as carving out, engraving the words of Torah into our souls. And that's why Hashem wants us to follow all mitzvot, whether it's statues, hukim, mishpatim, edut, testimonies, doesn't matter what laws they are, but we should engrave them, absorb them, and make them part of ourselves. That's what Hashem wants us to do. May we all succeed in Torah words, engraving in our souls, and may the Mashiach bring the last revolution to us in time and in peace. Thank you very much for listening to me. I will see you next time. Goodbye.